Okay, we'll call the November 19th, 2019 City Council meeting today. And let's see. Ms. Lewis, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And welcome, everybody. How many people are here for the residential parking permit discussion? Thank you. We'll get to that in a little bit. Roll call.
Mayor Duray.
Present.
Councilor Smith.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Fortune. Present. Councilor Rohr.
Here.
Councilor Todd.
Here.
Councilor Woolbrook. Here. Councilor Elder.
Here. Concerning the agenda, we've had two changes I'd like to request as part of the approval of the agenda. One is to remove item G3, and we'd ask that that item be postponed to the December 3rd meeting. The other is to move item F3, which is something on our consent calendar, to item G1, so that we can have some additional information presented to us. And with that, we entertain a motion concerning the approval of the agenda and any other changes.
I move we approve the agenda with the changes as noted.
Second. Is a motion and a second? Any further discussion? If not, please vote. Motion passes almost, maybe unanimously. Thank you. Public comment on non-agenda items. We typically allocate a couple of minutes in the beginning of the meeting. If there's anybody here who would like to comment to the council about an item that is not on the agenda tonight, we typically don't have a lot of back and forth, but we'd be glad to pass your concerns on to staff. Comment for council, listen. All right, hearing none. Just a quick reminder, if I can remind everyone on council and all staff, please have your microphones on. We're going to do our best, for those of you listening to this or watching this at home, to make sure that you can hear, actually hear what's going on. So just as a reminder to everybody, I see yours is ready to go. It's ready to go. Thank you. All right, consent calendar. We have 3 items now on our consent calendar: the warrants for October, approval of the minutes from November 5th, and approval of the purchase of a Bobcat 560. We didn't take a motion concerning the consent calendar.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar as written.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. We'll call item G1, which is now approval to apply for Colorado Department of Transportation CDOT Transportation Alternatives Program funding for Creek Walk Trail construction. Ms. Birchall.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council.
If you could pull that up a little bit, that should
Okay, there we go.
be on. Thank you.
So I just want to provide a brief update on this consent agenda item as we have some new information. And so just for some background, I serve as the city's representative to the TPACG Transportation Advisory Committee. And since we've had a gap in our public services director, I've tried to fill that gap. We've had a plethora of funding opportunities come up this fall, and I've also worked with John Merritt on some of these. And so we did apply for funding from the TIP program for Creek Walk Trail. It wasn't the highest priority, and funding was limited, and so all jurisdictions withdrew a project and made some other cost reductions. And so at that meeting, CDOT recommended that we pursue another opportunity for Creek Walk Trail. For these types of multimodal projects, there's a much broader pool of funding sources to go after. And so, they, have a funding round that is, 2 steps, a draft and then a final application. And so I met with CDOT yesterday to go over, the scope of the application. And, I initially thought we might apply for 1.5 million in funding. There's less than that available per year for a region, so CDOT suggested that we scale the request back a little bit. So, what was suggested is that we apply for funding to construct the section of trail from Shriver Park to Mayfair, and that's actually almost $1 million. And so we would submit a request, over 2 years, 500 for 2022 and 500 for 2023. We would still be required to provide the 20% match. They actually recommended there's another funding program we might consider for that, so I'll work with public services staff to, get up and running on that one. So, in a nutshell, just wanted to seek your approval to pursue this grant. If we get approved after the draft stage, we'll do a final application and would come back to seek a resolution from you at that time. And so, some other background, we also have some federal funding to do design for a portion of the trail. And so, the area, just so you can see a little bit better, this is where we're applying for construction funding. We already have design for that area. And then the other federal funding that we have, which is about $500,000, would be used for design and survey from Mayfair to Old Man's Trail. So I think the timing is good. We'll have time to do the design and then, transition to the construction.
And Karen, I would just say that, the first thing you said we have the design for, we actually have the construction documents and surveys already completed for that first section.
Correct.
So we're quite far ahead, we just need the construction
Correct.
dollars at this point.
Right, and that's been submitted to CDOT for their review.
So question, is that, because I know there's an existing trail there, is it going to relocate the one that's existingly there at that point from the pool to Mayfair, or you just going to, is that one just gonna be improved?
I think that dirt path is in the middle of our alignment, so that will be improved.
It'll match what the, the phase 1 of Creek Walk Trail would be, and ADA compliant and so on.
Okay.
And part of the reason why this, segment is so expensive is we'll be replacing the bridge by the Chamber. And that's almost $500,000.
Really? To replace that bridge? Mr. Cheney, how much did you get a bridge for?
180,000.
There you go, talk to Mr. Cheney.
We might be talking.
2 weeks, 180, it's done. Any other questions from Ms. Bridgeport? Okay. Anything else?
I think that's it.
If not, we'd entertain a motion concerning the approval of the CDOT Transportation Alternative Program funding grant.
I move we approve, the application for Colorado CDOT, Transportation Alternatives Program funding for Creek Walk Trail, construction.
Is there a second?
Is that the correct motion? I'm sorry. I'm just realizing that that may not be the correct motion, Karen. We want to apply for the CDOT, funding for, Creek Walk Trail construction. Is that the correct?
That's correct, yeah, under the Transportation Alternatives Program.
Okay, so that is it. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion, is there a second? Second that. There's a motion and a second, any further discussion? If not, please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, thanks for keeping your eye out for funding, for pursuing this grant. We'll call item, which was item G1, now item G2, Notice of recent appointment of Debbie Sagan to the Urban Renewal Authority Board. Is Sagan here by any chance? This is really just an item that we can have now of record. The mayor is authorized to make this appointment. I did check with council last week, I think it was, in the work session. No one on council indicated any concerns or objections, but I did want to notice in public, so that we have an official record, that I will be appointing Ms. Sagan to fill the vacant role on the Urban Renewal Authority Board. Any questions concerning that? We don't need a formal motion on that. Item G3, which was G2, consideration of a resolution number 2319, a resolution establishing parameters for community engagement concerning the short-term rental ordinance project. And I believe, Ms. Anthony, you're going to give us just a very brief update of that.
It's gonna be very brief because I haven't seen this before tonight. I just printed it off. We did have our first public engagement meeting, for the short-term rental ordinance, last, Thursday. And let me look here and see what this says. We do have money in the budget, for this next year. I did confirm that. If we need to hire some assistance, which is a conversation that we actually need to have, about, kind of how to backstop some staff shortage in that area. And so, this resolution is what Kim is proposing, for the plan for our, vacation rental public engagement. And I really can't add anything to it, cause like I said, I'm just now literally looking at it. You know, if there's significant questions, you may wanna postpone it until a time when Kim can be here. Was just too sick to come.
Thank you, Ms. Anthony. I can fill in a little bit, concerning this. I think the intention, the council has previously seen the worksheet, and the intention of the worksheet was to outline not just the community engagement, but the issues, what issues were we interested in pursuing, who were the stakeholders, who's interested in that, the desired outcomes, and so forth. The intent is to have this type of a worksheet and then ultimately the resolution at the beginning of the project, so that we put some parameters around the project, we identify what issues, perhaps timeframes, funding, resources, etc., and then to move forward with the project. So this is a little bit behind, but the council did see the worksheet. I don't recall exactly when that was presented, but it was presented to council before. So I think the only things that are missing from this resolution is, and by this time, again, it's already happened, perhaps in the future we'll have the number of members that we're suggesting on the planning team. Right now, I think there are, I'm not sure, maybe 7 or 9-ish,
Yeah.
give or take, on the planning team. So they have been meeting, and as Ms. Anthony mentioned, they planned this meeting that was last week. And it does have a time frame in there. Just to be clear, item E on the project team, which is citizens and or others that have interest or ownership in short-term rentals. These are interests, not necessarily just people who own a short-term rental or have an interest. It's anybody in the community who's interested in the topic, which is what that is. And that planning team is already in place. Any other questions from council? If not, we'll entertain a motion concerning resolution 2319.
And we'll have some comments when the appropriate time comes.
All right, we'll take a motion in a second and then have some discussion.
I'll second.
Well, we didn't have a motion yet.
Oh. Bring my questions on. Let me get to the notice and I'll make a motion. Here, I'll make a motion. Sorry. I move we approve resolution number 2319, a resolution establishing parameters for community engagement concerning the short-term rental ordinance.
Is there a second? I'll second that. Great, we have a motion second. You need to speak into your microphone.
That's right.
Thank you. Amber, did you I think she got that.
I heard.
Thank you, Amber. Any further discussion, Councilman Todd?
Right, a couple of things. When this was first discussed, there was a lot of talk about integrating this with the ADU program and talk about relative to consultants, this mentions $20,000 for community engagement, but there was a conversation about consultants that go out and actually study and do fact finding. For example, what is the occupancy rate of our existing inventory of short-term rentals? What does that occupancy look like? What does the occupancy in our hotels look like? How does it compare to other communities? And getting some more objective parameters in real data to compare our community to other communities. I don't see that within this project outline, so I'm concerned about that. That's one concern.
Let me just address that. It isn't in here, but it was brought up the other night at the meeting, and perhaps Ms. Anthony can confirm that that will be incorporated into the conversation moving forward. Others have brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, it did come up the other night at the meeting, and it is something that we're gonna look at to try to see what's available. We actually have resources through host compliance where they can give us a report on occupancy rates for our existing approved vacation rentals, and the chamber may have occupancy rates for hotels, so we may not need a consultant to do that type of thing. But there may be other things that, looking at other communities and things that we may need some assistance with.
So just as 1 of 7, I'd like to see that built into this understanding, because this understanding is taken forwarded to the next council, and look, this falls into the area of hearsay. Second item is.
So hold on, so you're asking that the resolution be amended. Would you like to make that motion to amend to include the language, and therefore the staff would have the exact language that you're requesting, and you can incorporate that into the resolution?
Well, there's a funding question, because the $20,000 when initially described was not gonna be for community engagement, so I don't know.
It is not for community engagement, it's technical assistance, I believe. There's perhaps a portion, but it's mostly, I believe, for a consultant concerning the ordinance itself.
It refers to Ono, which does not.
Right, it is for community engagement.
There is some of that.
The other item that you have, the ADU, is part of the zoning, that we put in for next year, so it's not part of this, it's gonna be part of our zoning, our code, right, for our zoning. So that is separate issue than this one. This one does say for public engagement, but as we go through the public engagement, there may be other items that we're gonna have to look at that they asked for, right? At the last meeting, they wanted some specific detail. We're gonna see what we can get from the chamber or from others. We may or may not need to hire technical assistance. Some of it may just be, we need to do some research.
And Bob, in the resolution itself, it says the $20,000 is for the zoning consultant. It would have been higher, but Kona will be doing the engagement, so the cost will be lower.
And the funding for Kona was up to $2,000, I believe.
Yeah, that's what it says here.
Yeah. So,
Community
did that
engagement
answer your
line item
question?
was $75,000.
Well, I'm just pointing out the softness in it. The next point is regarding community members. I'm not sure about that selection process, how many people are we talking about?
Ms. Anthony, do you recall, are we talking about the planning team? Is that what you're asking?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
I think the question was the composition of the planning team, is that right? Are you?
Project team.
The project team. And I did ask Ms. Hollick if she had the names of those members, you may know that, right?
Well, the two members from the planning commission are Alan Dulwich and Mike Casey. Let's see, Karen Cullen is on the team, Chris Dwyer is on the team, Karen owns and manages vacation rentals, and Chris owns a vacation rental. Stacy Vance from the Villa is on the team. Green Toll is on the team as a citizen, and also with her interest with the HAB. There is another citizen that is just a citizen at large, whose name I cannot recall. Barbara.
Bunn?
Yeah, Barbara Bunn.
And Annie Schmidt on there?
Yes, and Andy Schmidt's on it as well. And that's,
Does that answer your question, Councilman Todd?
It does, I just would like to see that specifically in the that's being done. And I think my last point is the subtlety of within 90 days of presentation of the project recommendations by the project team, the city council should take formal action to amend the code as recommended. That, and it goes on to say later on that the project team can't commit the city, and the city reserves some rights, but that particular sentence would lead one to believe that the recommendation of the project team will be
Approved.
not approved, it will just be,
Should they formalize and consider, and then would be the better,
yeah,
yeah,
right,
cause you can't agree to pass legislation.
right. So I guess that'd be one word change I would ask for. Thank you, Jeff.
And I would certainly do a friendly amendment to, incorporate that change.
All right, the change would be in paragraph 5B, which would read that within 90 days of presentation of the project recommendations by the project team, the city council shall take formal action to consider the recommendations as provided by the project team.
Thank you, Ken. Right.
Anything else? Councilwoman Wilbur?
I'm good.
You're good. Anybody else?
Dave, is Como actually gonna be able to support this?
May or may not, I need to have the conversation of how we're gonna move forward with that. I think, Diana might be able to help us.
As you know, they did whenever that was last week. But Diane Motion has
Right.
left Como, so that's a good point.
She has reached out to me, I just have not had a chance to get back to her.
My understanding is she was interested in considering that and would be available perhaps, so. Any other questions? All right, if not, we have a motion, a second concerning resolution 2319. We did have one proposed and friendly amendment to section 5. Any other discussion? If not, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Stephanie. Item G3, which is now item G4, consideration of planning, that item has been postponed to December 3rd. The next item, G4, which is now item G5, consideration of Transportation and Parking Board TTP recommendations for modification of the Manatee Avenue residential parking permit area by removal of paved parking and inclusion of the on-street parking in the 1000 block. Having called the item, I will note for the record that I have a conflict. I do have own property in that area. I will be recusing myself. The Mayor Pro Tem will be taking up this issue.
Thank you. Okay, so Michelle, this is your item, if you'd like to give us, we did have the opportunity to, discuss this last week. So, sure, fill us in on if there's anything new from last week's discussion.
Well, I don't know that there's anything new, certainly we can answer more questions. I do have a little, one-page summary that David Corfin provided that I think does focus on some of the items that we really didn't get a chance to talk about, maybe to answer some of the questions that were kind of hanging out there. And I can either read this or I can hand it out, whatever.
Or if you could just quickly summarize if there's
Sure.
any, I believe I had access to that and it was somewhat, redundant with some of the things that had been in the previous submission.
Sure, there's a lot, all this information is in
the packet.
the packet,
Right.
it's just whether you got through that whole packet, cause there's a lot in there. So, in David's little summary, he notes there will be 2 visitor business parking spaces in front of the kitchen, which we had talked about, that are planned to be operated the same as the other 2-hour business parking in the rest of that Manitou Avenue RPP. Key issues, adding more cars to the existing RPP, requires removal of paid parking in the 1000 block on the south side only, so the north remains paid parking. There'll be a significant parking deficiency in the Manitou Avenue RPP after the addition of the properties in the 1000 block, and 9 of the parking spaces in the new Manitou Avenue RPP are used as 2-hour visitor parking. So that was one of the things discussed at the Transportation and Parking Board, is just adding these properties into the RPP without adding any additional parking spaces, kind of made it wasn't really a tenable situation. It created a lot more congestion and was probably over and above what that existing area could handle. So the properties in the existing Manitou Avenue RPP and the ones being added provide affordable housing that's severely limited based on the Housing Authority surveys. He talks about relegating people that live in these residential units to second-class status by not providing parking on the street in front of where they live. This area is a little unique, well, it's unique for Manitou Avenue because it is entirely, I mean, the most of the units other than the kitchen property are residential, and they don't have any off-street parking. None of those properties have access to off-street parking. And the issue really came up not only among the Carleys who own the Banana Manor property before we ever talked about Waltham, but once Waltham RPP was under discussion, that's where her tenants for all 7 units park right now, and that won't be available to all those tenants if the Waltham RPP goes through. And so that engendered this discussion, and then the Waltham RPP asked to be put on hold until this issue was resolved because they're pretty concerned. That's a very congested area as well. There are other areas that we can look at, you know, adding somebody to an RPP that backs up to them or something like that. But we don't really have that feasibility in this area just because everything is so tight and there's so much density. And I think I mentioned the other night at the council work session that this is more similar in density and you know, the number of parking spaces and the number of adjacent residences than we have on Ruxton. We have a couple of areas on Ruxton where there is RPP only 24/7, 365. There's no paid parking, and that's the analogy I think that we made for this area and why removal of the paid parking was proposed. So I'm glad to answer more questions. I know that there's members of the public here that can want to weigh in as well, but whatever you need, I can try and address.
At this point, let's open up. Does council have any questions before we open it up for public comment? Does council have any questions for Michelle on this issue?
I do.
Okay.
As we consider this, we know this is step one of possibly step two, which is an RPP of a welcome. Michelle, thank you for referring to that. What I would like to have be considered, this area fits my ward, so since 2017, I've been on top of the Waltham RPP situation. I phased out of that when I got into the bulk of the cog, and Susan Warbrick kindly picked up the banner that we were pursuing there. The status of the Waltham RPP is last count, which is, this is 9 months old data, it was pretty much a tied vote in terms of some residents wanted it strongly, some residents strongly did not want it. What's driving all this is the shortage of space up there, and previously, maybe 3 years ago, Facebook and other entities were suggesting to people if they didn't want to pay a parking fee in Manitou to go up and park on Waltham. That's toned down, so that compression's not happening. But where the compression is happening is in the area of Banana Manor, and you referred to that. So what I think is important is when we put this Manitou Avenue RPP in place, to really start capturing data on Waltham in terms of how much by site, how many parking spaces are available there during the day, during business hours, how many are available at night. Because I think ultimately, with that information and being able to share that with the residents, they can make a more informed judgment about, for example, should the resident parking only be nighttime hours and day be more open, for example. There's nothing about these RPPs that says they run with the land. they can be changed at any time. And so I think this is a great step to Manitou Avenue. I think it's important to start really observing that SP Plus can do this, the police department can do it. Just driving down the road once and just eyeballing how many vacant spaces now exist on Waltham, how congested is it really?
Right. Yeah, and I think there's, that's one of the things that's on the to-do list, not just for Waltham, but other areas. I think there's probably some areas, some RPPs that are existing that, you know, may have some capacity, but because of other issues, may not be good candidates for allowing just anybody from outside the neighborhood to come in and park, turnaround, narrowness of the roadway, problems with, getting a fire truck in and out if somebody parks badly, you know, that type of thing, and I think Waltham probably may fall into that. But there are some other RPPs that probably have some capacity, and we need to examine that. Grand Avenue has had some capacity, but we're gonna be moving, proposing to move some parking that was initially proposed for Park Avenue back on Grand, and so there won't really be the capacity back there, plus they don't have a turnaround. So, you're right, there are things that we're gonna be looking at down the road as far as maybe amending some RPPs, establishing maybe some permit fees that, you know, that help defray a little bit. It's not gonna be a big revenue generator at all, but, those kinds of discussions need to happen, but I think they should happen separately from the RPP applications that we're processing.
And then I would agree with you in terms of the first step, but I would say for the next step, Waltham, that does come up. I think that particular one does, maybe that's the pilot program, or whether we learn if we monitor these things.
Sure.
Thank you.
Anything else, council members, before we approach vote?
I have some comments, I don't know if Michelle needs to answer them, but I have some comments. Okay, is that okay? Okay, so I would, agree in large part with Councilman Todd, but I would give it more structure if I were to move forward on this tonight. I just wanna say that, you know, there are compelling arguments for going both directions on this, and I've heard them all. And I think for everyone on this council, it's gonna be a challenge, because I think you can argue on both sides of this and feel very right about that. I think that, Bob has made a good point that if we move forward with this, we need to have it structured and we need to collect some data. And we need to also expect this community to continue the level of engagement that they've had before. And I have some suggestions for that, and I just wanna go through them and get them on the record so that we don't lose track of them, because sometimes we make these decisions and we never revisit them, and they just hang out there, and things may or may not be going well, and it's not really, there's no path to making changes or adjustments, and I'd really like to see us do this one differently if we're going to vote to move forward to do this. I think the neighbors in this community have been working for 2 years to try to find a solution to the parking problems that this particular segment of town experiences. You know, you don't know what it's like if you don't live in this neighborhood, and that is just a really important thing to remember as we move forward. I think they're proposing a creative solution, and I think they've compromised to come to this solution. And in my mind, that's what makes Manitou different. We're not like Colorado Springs or other communities. We do try to do these creative, community-oriented challenges. That being said, that's a lot of work, and it's a lot of accountability, and you can't just drop the mic if you leave here tonight and it passes and not continue to do the level of work that you've done so far. I think that if I were to say yes to this tonight, it would have to be provisional, which sounds like a scary word, but Councilman Todd's already pointed out that RPPs can be changed at any time. They're not etched in stone. And we've modified a lot of RPPs in our 5 to 6 years of paid parking, including Bruxton has seen quite a few of those, and even the Duclos Osage has seen a couple of changes as well. But I think we have to get serious about collecting some data and feedback on how this is working. And I would presume, Roy, that if you're going to be managing parking, that some of this would fall on you as to oversee as a project manager. and here's some ideas of what I think we need to do. They kind of mirror Councilman Todd's. I think we do need to figure out how we're gonna collect some data. Now, SP Plus can do some normal data on times that I'd like to know how often they go by, the tickets, the revenue, the revenue will go away, but I think the revenue is more than made up in other changes that we've made along the way. Here's my super big concern, and this extends way beyond what you're doing here. We don't have enough enforcement to do this creative thing and make it work. So I would propose that when we renegotiate the contract with SP Plus, we talk about assigning a parking enforcement officer to these specialty creative zones that we're creating. There's a lot of 15-minute zones around town that are abused. There's some 2-hour zones that are really wonderful when you find them, whether you're a visitor or a local, but they're abused a lot. And so I think that SP Plus or whoever does our parking next time really needs to create an enforcement person who really makes sure that those 2-hour spaces in front of the kitchen turn over, because if they don't, if they're not enforced, I can guarantee that you're gonna see the same car there every day breaking the rules. I can promise you that. So if we're gonna do this, we have to put some structure to it, we have to put some data to it, we have to be serious about enforcing it and any other zones in town that we created as a community. I think Bob's suggestion that the police department might be able to help us with collecting some of that data as they drive through on their patrols or walk through, just anything that we can get to try to get a picture of what's happening if we were to go forward with this. And I think that I would love to see the parking applicants for Waltham, or the parking manager, the person who actually put that forward, I think that's you, David, for the Manitou RPP. I'd love to see you come into the transportation and parking board meetings, I mean, as often as necessary, to report on how this is working. Is it working? Is it relieving congestion? And I also think that, again, my mantra, we can't be quiet about this. We've got to tell people what we've done in this area. These spaces have converted to RPP and things like that. Because if we're just doing these changes and we're not telling anybody and people start getting tickets, and you've also, for those of you who want this change, advocate to it. When people ask you about it, advocate for it. When people go on social media and say you've made a terrible decision, speak up. Don't just let it sit out there. Just try to advocate for this creative solution that you're putting forward. Own it. And help us, help your city staff and your parking vendor really see if you can make this work. I propose that you be back in front of the Transportation and Parking Board in September, and at this time next year, you'd be back to see if we're gonna go forward the way it is, if we're gonna make a change, or we're gonna just turn it back over to what it was. And while all of that sounds drastic, any RPP can do that at any time. And thanks for indulging me in that extra time.
Thank you. At this point, how many people would like to speak from the public? 1, 2, 3. Okay, great. 4. Okay, super. So, if we could limit your comments to 2 to 3 minutes, and Rachel, let's start with you.
Rachel Buller, 201 Spencer Avenue. My husband and I own the building at 1031 Manitou Avenue. And I'm in support of this creative solution, and I'll own it. Because my tenants have never had any place to park, except to pay in the parking lot since the new RPP went through. So I have 2 things to say. One is I just want to make it clear, I read the write-up and I may have missed it, but I just want to make it clear that this is only on the south side where the paid parking is being eliminated. And the other thing is that I want it to be clear that that last space, which is the only space on the south side of that block, it's a handicap space, that's going to stay there. there's a handicap space in front of David Gonzalez's, right by the mountain man kind of, or in front of what used to be the car wash that's closed now. So that, I didn't see that in the write-up, but I may have missed it, so just wanna make sure that that gets addressed somehow, that handicap space.
Thank you. David, I saw your hand up.
I'd like to go last, I think.
Okay, who? Yes, and I'm sorry, I can't recall your name, but come on up. And I forgot to say this, please state your name and address when you come to the podium, thank you.
My name is Ed Parsons. I'm at 36 Waltham Avenue. And before I say this, I just wanted to address a couple of real quick points that were made. One regarding about the congestion being down there on Waltham Avenue, just on Manitou Avenue. I agree with you fully that this needs to be looked at, but knowing, since I drive up and down that street at least once to multiple times a day and park there, I can tell you that that is not the only place where that congestion is. Up by my house, we have the same issue, and that's 36 Waltham Avenue. The other point had to do with just kind of the free parking and all that stuff. Take a look at your free parking meters, man. It's a 30-minute free parking meter, and all I have to do is wait till 28 minutes goes by, I drop back out there and push in another 30 minutes. I can do that all day long. So make it so that it's set up so that it can only do one 30-minute free parking, and you'll more than make up the money difference that you're gonna lose from 9 paid parking slots. I'd like to read my statement. I was going to start out by telling you 55 years ago, Banana Manor was built, okay? And during the most of the 20th century, they've been able to park their private cars on the streets where they live on Manitou Avenue. Around 2013, the city of Manitou Springs decided to recode this portion of Manitou Avenue as a business district and install paid parking meters without consideration, consultation, or discussion with the owner or the residents of Manitou Avenue. This happened in 2013. The impact of this decision left no place for Manitou Avenue residents to park their car to begin to park the car on Waltham Avenue, creating additional congestions on that street. This is stuff you all know. Elected city officials are now concerned that revoking this paid parking status of 9 slots of Manitou Avenue will result in lost revenue, set a precedence where they'll have to justify to other citizens in Manitou's about changing parking status. I put this in here from what I heard during the last meeting. This seemed to have been a concern. The city of Manitou should have considered these issues back in 2013 when they initially made the changes. Where was the concern about setting a precedence in 2013 when they took the historically precedent parking slots from Banana Manor? You didn't ask about precedence then. These changes were wrong then, and they are wrong now. So we ask that you do what is right, not what is convenient or easy for the city. Do what is right for the citizens. This issue doesn't affect just the residents of Banana Manor. It affects nearly 100 residents on Waltham Avenue as a result. So we ask you as representatives to do what is right and return Manitou Avenue parking slots to the other Manitou Avenue residents in Banana Manor. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else's hand did I see? Mr. Curley's hand? Or, okay, I couldn't remember who all I saw. Come on up, pleasure. And state your name and address, please.
Yeah, my name is Keith Shefflin. I'm at 40 Waltham Ave, and I'm here to support the extension of the Manitou Ave YPP to go into the 9 spaces. And because being up on Waltham was directly affected by people in Banana Manor parking and, filling up our street. And I just want to, remind council that we are residents of Manitou Springs. We live here all the time, and I've heard it stated that one concern is if there's no parking, the tourists will come down and be angry and go home angry because they couldn't park in Manitou Springs to do shopping and whatever, even though there is enough free parking. My point is, I live here, I come home, I can't park because there's no spaces. I get angry, I can't even go home. And in Waltham and Manitou Ave, we're landlocked. We don't have any place else to park. You know, I personally buy parking spots in the lot so that my kids can park their cars there. But, you know, I'm a resident having to pay for parking in Manitou Ave, in Manitou, where it should come with territory. And, you know, I know a lot of people live in places with driveways and it's not an issue and they're not in the historic district with all the, you know, the packed in thing, but, you know, if we stay open parking, I can guarantee you it's gonna be all over the place and we're gonna get the incline, and when the GOG opens up, we're gonna get jammed with parking issues again, so. That's all I want to state, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Can I go?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Cassandra resident, 80 Waltham Avenue resident, and I just wanted to thank you, Councilman Wilbert, for what you said when you said that you appreciate we've spent a lot of time on this. So this whole group, I've seen at so many meetings over the last year and a half where we've come together. And when I heard the streamed version of your working session last week, I was disheartened because when the presentation happened, it seemed like a lot of people wanted to rethink the options and maybe we hadn't considered Ruxton's version. And I just want to promise you all, we have come together as all the people on Manitou and all the people on Waltham that this affects, and gone through all the options with planning, with parking, and with transportation at multiple meetings where we weren't even all on the same side at first, and worked towards, like you call it, a creative solution, and it's not perfect, but to start over or revamp is just so disrespectful of all these people's time, and it's not perfect. But a year and a half later, this is the best we got, and I just so hope you appreciate our time and consider voting yes.
Thank you. Okay, David?
Okay.
Sure.
Well, kind of in that vein.
And name and address, please.
David Corpenning, I am 1107 Manitou Avenue, which is actually in RPP. So as a member of the Manitou Avenue RPP, initially, it wasn't my preference to add these additional cars to the east. However, having participated in every meeting over the last year and a half with the Transportation Parking Board and everything else, I came to see that this was a compromise that we all had to work with between commercial downtown, between Waltham, and between Manitou Avenue. So that's my personal story in this situation, having to, you know, be part of it and make a compromise. We're still gonna end up with a significant deficiency in the existing Manitou Avenue RPP, but adding Michelle's, suggestion of adding these nine spaces will certainly help, but it's not gonna eliminate it. And to Susan's point, I'd be happy, I've been to too many Transportation Parking Board meetings lately, but I would be happy to, stay in that loop to see how it's all unfolding. So I say that in a sense, I would ask somewhat what Cassandra's saying is that there has been a lot of creativity, conversation, and I would ask the council, I know you guys have thoughts about this, but consider looking at that bigger picture and making some compromises in some of those details. I believe that there are some council people here that may feel that there's some changes that need to be made in the entire RPP program. And I think I would ask that that's a different question from what we're doing here. So right now, the Waltham RPP has gone through all the approval process. It's a long process, you have to do a lot of things, and it's gone through that process and it's happening. And so I would ask that you allow this process to be approved based upon staff and Transportation Parking Board. And if you have concerns about the general RPP program, wanting it tweaked, I think it should be done.
2 minutes,
differently.
David, just a fair warning.
I have 2 minutes left.
No, you have 1 minute left.
That you set those aside for what's before you tonight. So before you tonight is an RPP that's gone through a 2-year process, and if you wanna make changes to the general RPP, that's another conversation, and I would ask you to set that aside and look at just this RPP tonight.
Thank you.
Ms. Carly, come with me. Excuse me, pardon me. Hi.
And just before you start, we had allocated 20 minutes for this, and I just want to get council's concurrence or not to continue on for another probably 10 minutes. Let's hear it. Big issue.
Here,
Let's
I'll be
aim
quick.
to- okay,
I'm
thank
Debbie
you.
Carly, this is my husband Del Carly. We own Banana Manor, and we have for 30 years. We've been going through this for a long time, a very long time, and I was told by the city, we have 7 cottages. We need 11 and a half, I think it might have went to 14 parking spots. So I think we've been granted 3 up at Waltham. So that leaves quite a deficiency. We've always parked there. I think too, you know, when the bus comes, I think it does a turnabout and it goes up. I don't think it goes down that way. It's historical, started building in 1884. It's always been there. And tenants need a place to park. They can't park at the parking lot when there's sometimes there's no available spots. And I don't know what's going on or why everybody is so upset. This has been going on since 2013. We didn't say anything until Waltham is like, we're getting crowded out. There's no parking. I wouldn't be standing here if my tenants had parking, but my tenants are upset, and as landlords, we need to try to solve that. This city should help us solve that. This is your problem as much as ours. It's been created once the parking spots got up there. So I would like my tenants, when they buy ice cream, have children, need to lug their laundry, I would like them to be conveniently located. Right now, I had a tenant who just moved out, 1 car. Now a couple, because I raised the rent a few hundred, I need 2 cars. I always, when people move in, how many cars do you have, no pets? That's important to me because I don't wanna do that to my neighbors. But things are getting more expensive, takes 2 people to afford an apartment. So I'm hoping the city will help solve this problem that has really gone on for like 2 years. And that's, you know, I'm looking for you guys to help us.
Help us.
Yeah, we're doing the right thing. So, and hopefully it's not 2 more years that we've been going to meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings. I mean, let's make a resolution to get it solved. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, does anyone else wanna say anything? I didn't have to tonight. Jay, did you have something? Okay, go ahead.
Sure. Really not in favor of this, nor any other ones going forward, without a serious look at what we have. If I also own a place that has no parking, I pay $600 a year for parking. It's the way it is. Overrun, you don't want the incline, I've got the incline. With all these issues, at the end of the day, this town has a serious parking deficiency. The section of Ruxton, it's $5 an hour to park. Seems like it should be the same or less than on the avenue in order to facilitate using those spaces that are available for paid parking. The Ruxton corridor wasn't asked just like people on the avenue. We were not asked about this RPP. It was given to us. The gift that keeps giving. And even though it's helped, 350,000 trips up the incline a year, plus COG, I'm well aware of traffic and parking issues. And I can appreciate the level of effort it's taken in your little neighborhood. But my point of wanting to revisit the whole thing is that it's 100 people, I believe somebody said, or it's 338 spots on Ruxton and who knows how many actual residences. But how does that play with everybody else in town? Because we're all in this together and we are a tourist community. We do have to keep that in mind because it's not just parking revenue, it's sales tax revenue. It's all of it. And it's not easy to figure out what's best for everybody in this community. And it's very difficult. And so that's why I would like to see us revisit all of it and stop playing this individual street game. Because I don't think it's working for all of town. What Councilman Todd and Councilwoman Woolbrick mentioned about a possible sunset to revisit this RPP, I think there should be a sunset not only on this one, but on all of them. And if we're going to have a sunset, I'll support this. But we really need to revisit our entire approach to how we allocate parking in this town for all of town. And even what I'm proposing for my section of Ruxton, which some places are better than others, is to actually increase visitor parking. I'm not asking to get rid of it. But the way things have been going, I could easily get my neighborhood to sign up and get rid of all the paid parking on Ruxton and have it just be an RPP similar to every other one in town. That doesn't help town. We have a deficit. Why the Transportation and Parking Board has not looked at West End property and asked us to buy some parking, if for no other reason, just put it as residential parking lots, is beyond me, because we keep doing things that are pulling parking out. The MAPS project, 90% of that was about parking issues. Nobody in any of that suggested anything to improve it except not do MAPS, which really doesn't help town either. Solutions to improve all of it is what I'm looking for. Let's buy the Shady Dell. Just sitting there with weeds. Looks horrible. It's just after the two houses on the other side of the Schmuchen line. It's got a little building on it because he didn't want to tear it down and tore down the rest of it. But the city made him tear down because it was on fire. And it has a mineral spring on it. But if council will go with a stop date or a revisit date, I'll support this.
Thank you. Jerry, anything? Okay, I tell you this, I think as is very clear, we've all struggled, everyone in this room has struggled over this issue. There are winners and losers, and none of us like that scenario. We all want to have everyone win, and it's just, at this point, the way it's come to us, it's not that everyone wins. Every time we approve an RPP, and we've approved, I think, everyone that's come to us, we've reduced the flexibility of the city in terms of our parking options. And I think it comes to a basic philosophical question of what does the city owe, or what is the city's responsibilities in terms of providing parking on our public streets to private citizens? Is that an obligation? Most cities, or many cities, it's not. There's lots of other issues surrounding it. And I think probably we've come to that point in this city where the supply is so far under the demand that we need to be thinking of even more creative solutions than just looking at how many parking spaces we have and how many parking spaces residents need. So it's really come to an economic question in the bigger aspect of economics, just not dollars and cents. So I guess I see several options that we might want to consider as we formulate a motion here. One is we accept or approve the proposal and the recommendation as staff and the TPB has brought to us. Second, we could reject it. That's what, very simple, up or down. 3, we can do a moratorium on RPPs in general. Just stop doing them until we do some of the data collection that Councilwoman Mulbrook and Councilman Todd has talked about. And I think there's a lot more data that we need to, as I said, other than just how many parking spaces do we have and how many parking spaces do residents need. That's a pretty simplistic way of looking at it. In this day and age when we, the easy decisions are over with, we're into really, really hard decisions right now. And as Councilman Rohr said, what is best for the entire city? So moratorium on RPPs in general until we assess the situation a lot more fully. And I know that sounds horrible because you've been assessing your situation for a long time. We could provisionally approve with a clear understanding that will come back to us in 6 to 12 months. I know that the city staff is reorganizing to look at parking in a much more comprehensive, strategic, systematic way. Or we can approve and put a moratorium, approve this one and put a moratorium on all future RPPs. So I will throw that out, and unless there's further discussion, I would entertain a motion.
I would like to make a motion, along the lines of threading the needle to capture Councilman Rohr's vote, hopefully Councilwoman Pro Tem Fortson's vote, Councilman Warwick's vote. I'll have to look hard from Councilman Elders, and Gary, you've not an opportunity to speak. Would you like to speak first before I make my motion?
No, the motion is yes.
Yes. All right, here we go. I would move that make a motion, the first part of which is in our packet, so I'll read it. Based on the recommendation of the TBB, I move to approve the proposal to remove the paid parking designation of 9 existing spaces and expand the Manitou Avenue RPP area to the street frontage of properties from 1013 to the vacant property next to 1107 Manitou Avenue, and with the operation details as outlined in the memo dated November 6, 2019. Further, staff shall establish a track consistent to determine parking space utilization patterns throughout the week and day on Manitou Avenue and Waltham Avenue. This Waltham Avenue RPP will be reevaluated the earlier of A, Waltham Avenue RPP application being submitted, or 9 months. So we would basically use this, that's the motion, done. And just one comment, we would use this as a pilot midway point across the spectrum that Councilman Pro Tem Fortune suggested, but I don't think it would be a whole nother meeting if we're gonna freeze RPPs and all those kinds of discussions. We can't do that tonight, that's not on the agenda tonight. What's on the agenda tonight is strictly a decision on the Waltham RPP, hence my motion. Do I have a second?
Got a question?
Yeah.
Can you read the last part again? I think you meant the Manitou Avenue PP, not Waltham on the first reference.
In terms of the data collection? No, the very last one.
Further down on the data collection.
Correct. So that would be the Manitou Avenue RPP will be reevaluated the earliest of either a Waltham RPP application being submitted or 9 months.
Say it again? Yeah. No, sorry.
Say it again, sure.
So, can I ask a question? Well, let me ask this question before you read it. If Waltham puts in their application tomorrow, we have no time to evaluate it, right?
Waltham application is in the process. It has been for a while. So there's no submittal needed. They've already made submittals. It's been months ago.
So,
So then it's just
so-
9 months.
so given that that's live, then I would suggest that there be a cooling off period for 6 months before it can be resubmitted, before it can be acted on. So we have the data. I mean, we're not gonna have the data, then we're not gonna have the need for it. Plus, it's winter. This is not prime parking spaces.
So
Conversation.
if we could simplify, what I hear is you wanna approve the RPP as was submitted by staff and TPB. You want to, embark on a 9-month data collection system to evaluate this particular RPP, or the Manitou Avenue RPP.
And Waltham, because it interacts with Waltham Avenue.
Okay, and was there anything else?
Yes, then we have to have a decision point.
Okay, and then they would have that, it's basically provisional for 9 months.
Correct. We could simplify
Okay.
it to that.
And okay, so that's 3 components of your motion. And you are not proposing a moratorium on additional RPPs in that 9 months, or you are?
No, because that's a totally new topic, and I think we have to notice the public that we're gonna have that type of vote.
Jeff, would we need to notice the public on that type of vote?
I'm sorry, I was looking at another issue.
If we were to decide tonight, even though it's not been on our, agenda tonight, could we, in conjunction with this RPP, put a moratorium on future RPPs for at least 9 months?
You know, I would prefer that you actually do that with, another resolution, at your next meeting.
And notice
It's
it.
not on the agenda, it hasn't been noticed. Ultimately, it's your own moratorium, because you're the ones who are approving the RPPs. So it wouldn't necessarily, there's no way it's gonna apply, but I think next meeting would be better.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion on the floor for those 3 components: approve, data collection, and, bring it back in 9 months.
Hey, Bob? I'm sorry.
Well, my question is, do we need to specify how to bring it back? I mean, where are we gonna get the details on that? Is staff gonna help us work that out?
Oh, I would assume that staff would help us work that out.
Does that need to be part of the motion or not?
That staff brings it back to us in 9 months?
Well, I just think if you're going to say it's a provisional approval, then I think you have to tell these people what dates they're gonna hit to make sure that they're still, that they can
Okay.
be prepared and they're not hanging out there wondering when and what and how, because that to me would make me feel very uneasy leaving tonight. So it just seems like, it's not that I disagree with Bob's motion, I just think that if it's a 9-month thing, it needs to be a little more specific, and I think it first needs to come before the Transportation and Parking Board, because they will have staff present, and they will make a recommendation, and then it'll come to council saying, it's been 8 months, and, we're here to tell you how it's going, and what we'd like to do.
Okay, we don't have a second on Councilman Todd's motion at this point, am I correct?
I was gonna ask Councilman Todd if he would like to extend the time period for stopping this RPP at June of 2021. Because data collection is gonna go for 9 months. It's not enough time to evaluate and come up with a plan and have either stop dead or have any sort of continuity going forward. And that gives everybody enough time to collect data, take a look at it, figure out where people wanna go, get it on agendas, have Transportation Board do their due diligence, council do theirs. It's just gonna take a lot more time.
Councilman Moore, I agree with the idea of having a definitive date. And perhaps what makes sense is we have an update in October or November of 2020, because that will then take into account the season and the summer season. And at that point, a determination can be made as to whether or not to revisit it. But I'd like to see something reviewed so we have the summer experience while it's fresh. But for some experience capture, I think the point is well taken, we need a longer track record.
So do you want to amend your motion?
Sure, I think the whole thing has to be amended, and thank you all for compacting it to 3 points, I would like to do that.
Can I have one more question? I agree that we need to put the moratorium discussion on a separate meeting, but if Waltham, which is in progress, votes with a majority to go forward with an RPP, we need that data too, wouldn't you agree? Because that data this is all tied together.
The data, to clarify, the data is Manitou Avenue, the segment of it, from Tubby's turnaround to the roundabout, be roughly in that zone, and Waltham Avenue. They kind of parallel track each other, if you would.
And since they're already in progress, the moratorium, if we were to vote in favor of that, wouldn't affect them because you're already in progress. And I just wanna make sure that we're collecting data from this whole group that's come together.
Can you give us that thing now, the whole thing?
Sure.
Thank you.
So the recommendation, motion is what's in our packet. Do you want me to reread that?
I think we can,
Look.
go ahead, sorry.
Right. Further, staff shall establish a tracking system to determine parking space utilization patterns throughout the week and day on Manitou Avenue and Waltham Avenue.
Bob, would we have to make it this complex? Or is our staff able, if we
Please.
just say it just simply that we would establish what data we need and gather that data in order to do future analysis?
Right, I defer to that.
Okay.
Thank you. And the public and council will review the results in November 2020 with a goal of determining when a conclusion should be reached as to the permanence of this arrangement.
Okay, so again, approve the motion, approve the RPP as presented, direct staff to determine what data needs to be collected to evaluate the success of the RPP for the entire community, and update the council in November 2020 to determine what the next steps are for it.
We want to be specific about Manitou Avenue and Waltham Avenue, not just
Okay.
carte blanche data.
And also we're going to extend the time period. You've got the provisional update now in November of 2020. Oh, okay, with the goal of determining a conclusion, is that what you're
The
taking
goal of
off
determining-
extending the time period for a future date in 2021, you're taking that out?
Correct.
Okay, so again, approve proposal, direct staff to determine what data should be collected, and put in a system to collect that data on both Waltham and these 9 spots, or the entire Manitou RPP.
The West Manitou.
So this RPP that's being proposed.
Right, so Manitou Avenue from Tubby's turnaround to the circle serpentine.
Okay, so both the existing Manitou RPP and the one that's being proposed on the south side.
I'm suggesting we need to do all of Manitou Avenue because it's gonna be a.
Okay, all of Manitou Avenue, okay, fine. And then, bring, the staff's analysis back and TPB's analysis back in November 2020 to determine next steps.
That's a good way to say it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Denise.
As you know, we're looking at parking as a whole, and we're trying to bring back something in March and then something again in the June timeframe. If we start looking at all these individuals, that's gonna take away from that parking as a whole as we're doing it. Cause we're gonna be looking at all aspects of it, we're really trying to get parking spaces, where they are and what that means. Could we just look at that in June and then reevaluate it at that time to see if you need something additional? Because it,
My sense, Denise, is that this fits into that.
okay. So that will be June timeframe then, we'll be bringing that back.
You can bring that back to us, and then I think, updates on parking in general is great.
And if I could just piggyback on that, I think that some of the things that we would be studying in this area, we need to be studying across the board.
Right.
So in a way, we're making it sound like this is a special project in their neighborhood, but it's really not, because we're gonna be looking at the whole thing. This will be part of that. And the problem with June, though, is that you haven't had summer yet, and I don't know how much relevant data you're going to have by June. This just allows this solution to go forward, and it'll be in place while you guys are doing all the things you're doing up until June, but it'll be to be determined as well. Because each neighborhood is somewhat unique. You know, but every RPP is not one copy of another. So we're gonna have that issue anyway.
So, we've got a motion on the table. I will tell you that I would personally like to add one thing which would help me vote for this, and that is that we also include that we will bring it back for discussion of a moratorium on future RPPs, at our next meeting, that we would bring it back as a meeting item at our next meeting. I don't wanna lose that, concept, not to vote on it tonight, just to bring it back.
Nancy, can I ask something about that? That's to put on another agenda. And you know, would you be willing to wrap Jay's idea of sunsetting as a concept into that work session discussion perhaps?
Absolutely. I think that, and I consider the provisional thing, the, fact that it's coming back in 2020, there's no, to me, that implies there's no assumption that this will continue past November of 2020.
Right, but I think Jay's concern was overall, and so I guess what you're saying is if we had a sunset, we'd be forced to reevaluate.
Correct.
But the problem is, we also have to have staff who can do that, and we've been pretty short-staffed and all those things, so, but that could be a great topic to combine with the moratorium in a work session, so that people have time to digest it, and then come back afterwards and think about it, and then staff has time to think about how that might impact what your needs are.
Council correspondence, because it's just a future agenda item, we can bring up and vote if we want it on a future agenda, which one we want.
Okay, thank you. With that, do we have a second for Bob's motion? Okay, Susan has seconded. Any further discussion?
Are we allowed to ask a question?
We're past that at this point. Sorry, I think we're just ready to vote now. Anything else from council?
Yeah, you have to forgive me, my technology has failed since I haven't been to council, I don't know why. So I'm a little bit behind the 8 ball or something here. I'm not sure, I know this isn't satisfying everybody's concerns out there. I really wanna free up the parking spaces for Banana Manor. I mean, that just seems like basic human rights to have a parking space. And, if you live in town, and I really think residents do come before tourists, I'm sorry. I don't see parking as a form of revenue, and I've fought to get that off of all of our city literature. Parking is a great way to make money, I think it stinks. And I also don't think that parking is really the solution. I think we do need, and I'm just saying this, I'm gonna go forward, but I'm just saying, more parking spaces is not the solution. I wish we could put the kibosh on the maps. I think that stinks. So many parking spaces, there's no amenities. What's an amenity? It's a tree. Danny, you think we're gonna want trees in 20 years? Now they've squeezed in a few more, but more parking spaces is not our solution. There's different solutions. Maybe we haven't even seen them yet. Maybe it's a whole, I was talking in an email to Susan, a whole Uber idea where Manitou has its own transit system where we bring employees into town for the businesses, and the businesses fund it through a very small fee. what does that look like? Electric cars, people, oh cool, I wish I worked in Amtrak to ride electric car.
In fact, if I could, that's what the mobility study is looking at, so we're gonna
I
have
know,
that.
mobility study is way late. This is right now, so I'm just saying this out here, and I hope I can get this stupid thing fixed. But, I just wanted to say those things, cause we are sacrificing everything for cars and our devotion to tourism and our lack of devotion to our sense of place. And I'm fond of this neighborhood, I live there, raised my kids there. The maps, if you're not going to the maps meeting, you're not gonna be happy, in my opinion. And so, anyway, I just wanted to say that, I'm gonna support it, because I want those 9 spaces freed up, to heck with the revenue, and I trust Bob, he's gonna go forward, I'm leaving in a couple of weeks, and, other people can take over, so, that's my rant, thank you.
Okay, are we ready to vote? Sorry. So it dies, oh, I turned on 10, sorry.
Oh, it's a tie. Darn that Kendra.
It's a tie. So with that, we have an option, we can, come up with another motion.
What do the people want to see us do?
We've heard what people want.
What
this group wants.
This has happened, what do they think?
Really simple.
Say it.
June of 2021.
I'm sorry.
June of 2021. It's a moratorium. It's valid until June of 2021, and I'll vote for it.
So, unless someone has another motion, I would suggest that we, discuss moratorium and further, I'm looking for what folks wanna do here.
So you want me to
You can
make
do
that
another motion that, I will vote for it if someone, if we can, say that it, that we're not gonna approve any other RRPPs, but that we can't do in this meeting, so.
Councilman Fortune, I think your hesitancy based on that, we've agreed we'll have a work session on that. I think Councilman Ross introduced the point of property acquisition, which, although Becky, I do understand that this is where your wish is, but something we should be looking at, and there has been enough awareness of potential properties that I think we could put that into that work session also in an appropriate manner. I think we need to bifurcate these things. Councilman Moore, you indicated if that date of October, which is a provisional date, had in it with a final resolution no later than June of 2021, would you go for the vote?
It expires in June of 2021 unless it gets extended.
Okay, so that would be the hard stop.
Yeah.
That,
Get the data, make decisions, have a really good plan on what it all looks like. Staff is already working on a more comprehensive plan. It's gonna take longer than, they will not bring it back by June, I'd be surprised, because you need more data from the summer, which we don't have from last summer, which is gonna take more time.
So would you like to make a motion to that effect, Jim?
I could not redo all of the things that Councilman Todd has put forth and
Would you like to
just a
redo your
date,
motion?
so
sure.
all you have to do is keep the same stuff, add a date.
Got it. Okay. And Nancy, when I add what you have done with, just interject, please. Okay, so, the motion is, based on the recommendation of the TPB, I move to approve the proposal to remove the paid parking designation of the 9 existing spaces and expand the Manitou Avenue RVP area to the street frontage of properties from 1013 to the vacant property next to 1107 Manitou Avenue, and with the operation details as outlined in the memo dated November 6, 2019. Staff will establish a study to measure parking space utilization on
Just-
Manitou Avenue and Waltham Avenue.
Just simple, that staff will collect data for and analyze on Waltham and Manitou Avenue RPPs. I would
Thank
recommend,
you.
yeah,
That's good.
sorry.
Thank you. This work will be reviewed by council in, November of 2020, status report. And this particular RPP will expire on June 2021.
Unless it's renewed, right?
No, just to expire, that's it.
It has to be renewed. If you want to keep it going.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Here.
I just wanna say where I'm at on this is, I understand what all the concerns are with council. I also understand what the concerns are with the residents and the public. And also just put back history, when they had before we started the parking program, we had just a walking parking person that walked up and down Manitou Avenue, marking tires and giving tickets, that they always went up to the 1,000 block, turned around and came back. So we heard things at that point in time from people who was up there, we got a ticket, we shouldn't have got a ticket, I live here, whatever. So I think there's always been a parking issue there. The problem I've got with this is that we as a council should have, back when we started this, we should have maybe thrown some of these expectations out there, and we had a group of people who were working on this for a year and a half, and came together with what they presented to us tonight. And maybe we could have been a little more direct and thorough, and maybe we didn't have Roy, maybe we should direct, all those things. But that's where I have the problem, is that we put a committee together, we put a group of people together, and then they come before us, and we go, we don't like it. So, that's where I'm at.
That's a huge issue, yeah. We're just about ready for a vote, so we're gonna move on. Any other
But it's
comments
unclear though,
from council?
there's some unclarity there.
Yeah. Then we'll go ahead and vote with no further. We have a second, right? Yes, this is second.
Second.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna work this one. There we go. Okay, so pass this, latest, one passes, so. Yes, David?
So,
You got what you wanted for the moment, so.
right, well, I just wanted,
Just a minute. Come up to the podium, please.
okay, so, when you talk about the Manitou Avenue RPP, is this the new section is under this?
It's
Thing.
as per the motion, it's the entire Manitou Avenue.
Cause that
RPP.
wasn't up for changing the existing
No,
Manitou
that's
Avenue
to
RPP.
study the RPP between now and, next November, and then to, look at this particular RPP in June of 2021 will sunset. At that point, it'll have to be, reconsidered by council.
But the motion that Bob made, and that Jay seconded, was recommendation for modification.
It's for the modification, not the rest of the RPP.
The one that existed before is not part of the, I
Right.
mean,
That's what I mean.
there wasn't any language in there that said that original RPP was going to be up for anything. I mean, I don't know
Is
how
that
how
clear?
you're doing
Is
that
that-
as staff, is this now, it's just one RPP altogether? We didn't really talk about that.
So my understanding of the sunset is it's the amendment that sunsets, it's not the
That is,
actual
that is.
existing.
I gotta thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
is my understanding
Good,
as well.
thank you, Joe.
That's a good
Not
question.
the RPP.
Thank
Just
you.
keep in mind that obviously any RPP can be amended at any time too. We created expectations and we wanna manage those expectations as well.
Yeah, and that was the other thing, any RPP, it's not
Right.
they're not conditional uses, so any RPP, you guys can change at any time. You can sunset every RPP in the town.
Yes.
So for you guys even talking about that, I thought was a little bit like, you already have that power. It doesn't run with the land, so. I
Yep,
just
got
wanted
it.
to-
Okay, thank you.
Nancy, I'd like to make a comment.
We've been at this for
I know.
an hour, so
It's
go
okay.
ahead.
It's okay, Ken, while Ken's getting in his seat. I just wanna say that buying land to make a parking lot is the lowest use of land. Paving it over, cutting down all of nature, what are we doing? And I think if we were to buy land, especially down in that end of town, we use it for affordable housing and growing food, not for parking. There's other solutions than parking lots, geez, you know? And look at how expensive concrete is. Look at that creek walk, $1 million, and how much for half a mile? Geez, Louise. I'm not in charge, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, we're gonna move on now.
I recommend we take a short break.
Take a short break. Sounds good.
And we do have some coffee and some food out there.
We had said originally that we were waiting. Okay, so we are allowed to, right, I mean, we're operating this, okay, but that was, our welcome is this part, we can then. It was part of the language, okay, cool.
So they changed the rules on this. So we're screwed.
No, I don't think so.
Till I'm hearing 2021.
That's just for reevaluating.
Well, what
It's going
happened?
into place now.
The Waltham?
The walk will move forward, it's in process.
Okay, so we can plan the meeting, because that's not what I was hearing.
Yeah, no.
I was hearing all this
Even
moratorium.
if they pass a moratorium, that application is in process.
Okay.
You can't stop an application, it's already.
Okay, that's what I'm worried, because that's what I was kind of hearing.
No. And that's from my standpoint, that's the same thing.
Okay, so we can plan so we can get the second meeting going?
We have two right now, Waltham and Park, that are
So we can plan the next one?
Yeah,
Okay.
that'll be the next thing you do. You're welcome.
I was like,
Yeah, I know, it's a lot.
what he just said.
Well, we'll have to look at the minutes if it's not what we can work with. No, they don't necessarily always look at every point of discussion. We'll see if it's in there. If it's not, we can just save the minutes.
Kind of get the
Potentially. There's like 500.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Could you ask the other council members, please, to join us? All right, we'll go ahead and call the meeting back to order. I would like to suggest that, having just listened to the meeting, that if you do talk into the microphone, it seems to work reasonably well. So that's the key. Have your microphone on, talk into it, and hopefully people can hear what we're saying. I was able to hear most of it as I was listening. All right, we're going to call item G5, which is now item G6. First reading of ordinance number 2419, an ordinance adopting the annual budget and appropriating funds for fiscal year 2020 and amending the annual budget for fiscal year 2019. It is G5, which is now G6. Thank you for the clarification. So the new G5 is as I've just called it. Ms. Davis.
Okay, so as per the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, local governments levying property tax must adopt their budgets before certifying the mill levy to the county. So the deadline for certifying the mill levy is December 15th, and thus this appropriation ordinance is being presented to City Council for first reading in order to meet this requirement. So there's been quite a few meetings, and City Council's had some work sessions, and this is the result of all of that. And at this point, there is a ending fund balance projected for 2020 of $1,084,000, and this is 11.75% of the operating expenditures of the general fund. And that is my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Questions for Ms. Davis? Yes, sir.
What's the penalty if we don't certify we don't pass all these things on our budget?
Then we don't get to certify a mill levy. And what the county then does is just give us 90% of what last year's mill levy was, the 2019's mill levy.
So, not a huge hit.
Uncomfortable.
Okay, but
Anything else? No. Any other questions for Ms. Davis? Thank you. Any other questions or comments concerning ordinance number 2419? We will have a public hearing, by the way, in 2 weeks concerning the budget. So if anybody would like to join us for that discussion.
And there will be another community presentation on Thursday, November 21st.
Thank you for mentioning that as well. At what time?
5:30. Oh, 5:30.
5:30 here at City Hall. Great. Thank you. Any other questions or comments concerning our 2020 budget and the amendment of the 2019 budget?
You ready for a motion?
I am.
I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 2419, an ordinance adopting the annual budget and appropriating funds for fiscal year 2020 and amending the annual budget for fiscal year 2019.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, please vote. Councilman Smith? Motion passes unanimously. Ms. Davis, thank you very much. We'll see you back in a couple of weeks, and I don't know who's putting on the public presentation, but thank you for doing that as well. Ms.
Our
Howard?
city administrator is presenting the budget to the community.
Very much appreciate that. Thank you. Yes.
I would like to say that this budget process is light years better than last year's budget process, and it's appreciated, at least
Thank you,
from over
Denise.
here.
Well, and to all the department heads, they all participated in this.
Thank you for those comments. Anything else? All right, we'll call item, which I believe now is the actual item G6. Consideration of resolution 2219, a resolution adopting an updated universal fee schedule. Ms. Davis, I believe you may have a comment or two on this as well.
Yes, I do. Every year, department heads get together and look at our fee schedule to make sure that it is covering the cost of the city doing business. The fees are supposed to cover the cost of the personnel and materials that are required for these actions. And thus, we do have some increases this year. And, first of all the application fees have been increased from $28 to $38 throughout the budget, except for the traffic management application fee, and that is increasing to $35. The pool, they only have one increase, and that is for showers, to be increased from $4.50 to $5 per shower. Liquor license fees, that's under city clerk, those are all changed to, be in accordance with the state laws about those fees. Before there was some, there's been some verbiage change, and this now all matches what the state has. Finance, we're only increasing our return check fee from $15 to $30. The $15 is what the bank is charged, and it's been pointed out to me that this does require some extra effort on our personnel, so we've increased it to $30. Parking, that's already been discussed and already been approved by city council. Planning fees were perused very closely, and one change was that there was an documentation fee, of $50. That's been taken away, and then all the fees been increased by the $50, and then the fees were then increased to cover the cost of personnel. It was re-examined, and it's felt that this is more in accordance to the actual time and for the personnel. And then water sewer, those rates were increased, but that's been approved by ordinance at an earlier meeting. Water meters, the charge when access is denied has been increased from $10 to $20. And labor to install a meter has been increased from $28 to $30. And this has been brought to city council earlier this year due to mayor requesting that this be done in a more timely manner, as per last year when I think it was presented at the last meeting in December. And if there is any questions, Michelle and I will attempt to answer them.
Any questions from council? Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Hey, Becca, thanks. Every time this happens, I have to bring this up about the showers at the pool. Because if you want people who are traveling through, and not everybody who's traveling through is some of the detested homeless, they're just travelers. And, it'd be nice if they were clean travelers. And so I don't know if charging an extra 50 cents is gonna cover the personnel and the cost of materials, yada, yada, yada. For the shower, I would just like to keep it affordable. And so I mean, how many, maybe Roy knows better than anybody, how many of these outside the swimmers use the showers at the pool? I can't imagine it's very much.
We do get a lot more than in the past. The one thing we have to consider at the pool is that minimum wage has gone up, and that's one of the expenses. So we're just trying to match, or not match it, but just try to help cover expenses somewhat. When we raise the other dues, we haven't raised the shower dues in years, so we thought this would be time to raise it up a little bit, to be fair and balanced.
We haven't raised it in years because they keep trying to resist it.
Yes, ma'am, you're right.
Yeah, because I think, I think it's important that people who, need a shower can take one and afford it. And it doesn't seem like a lot of money, but if you're traveling on the street, I don't know how many people, there's 60 people from the 60s and 70s out there. You don't have a lot of money when you're traveling with the backpack like the backpackers I've seen.
I will tell you that we don't turn anyone away. If they need to come in and they don't have that money, we will let them do the shower.
Really?
Yes, we will do that. We do have some funds that we get from Make a Splash and different areas that we can help cover a little bit. It doesn't happen often, but we try not to turn people away if they need it.
Oh, that's so great.
I would also
Don't
suggest
put that in the paper.
that the church would offer to cover some costs.
Yes, they do.
See, that'd be great, because I'd like to have, we have almost no resources for those people. I'd like to have at least a shower. So I did not know that.
Yes.
I'll retract any objections.
Any other questions or comments concerning the fee schedule? If not, we'd entertain a motion.
I move we approve resolution number 2219, a resolution adopting an updated universal fee schedule.
Is there a second?
Second.
So motion and a second, any further discussion? If not, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Thank you.
All right, we'll call item, G7, Public Works Assessment. Mr. Merritt, thank you for joining us back. It was my understanding that you were not going to be able to join us, but we appreciate you doing so.
No.
Maybe I misunderstood, thank you. No, I assume, Mr. Merritt, that everyone has read your assessment. Thank you for putting that together, and thank you for jumping in to help us when we needed you. Very much appreciate that. And I don't know if you had specific items you wanted to cover with us, or how would you like to?
Kind of up to you. I can go through them pretty quickly.
I don't think we need to go through all of them. I think you just go through and maybe highlight a couple of the key points, and then we'll open it up to council for questions.
First of all, I want to say it was a real privilege working here and a real enjoyment, and that you got some quality people, your staff. So, policies implemented. SOPs, which was badly needed. We couldn't do anything with personnel people that were acting out because we didn't have any standard procedures. It's something that needed to be done, and the first round of those are in. We've got some purchasing controls so that not everybody and their brother's out buying stuff with no oversight. Or the oversight came after the device or whatever they bought showed up. So that's been done. In the budget of this year, I put two things in it that I would recommend they continue on. One is I put in $30,000 in additional parks money for tree maintenance, for trimming dead limbs. And for 5,000 of that would be for new trees. And the device, the Bobcat that you approved tonight has an auger attachment, so that putting those trees in will be a slam dunk. So they can purchase open stock and put in new trees as part of that. Then there was bridge maintenance in there. It was used mostly for the yearly inspections or the every other year inspections that have to be done. I'm suggesting that early in the spring that it becomes a standard policy that you get with your mates to go in and clean up anything that needs to be done, get it back into shape so it doesn't get worse. That you protect what you have and make sure the stones are there, and because once the stone comes out, then you're gonna be looking at water causing a lot more problems in that area. So I recommend that you continue that every year and you make it a priority in the early part of the year to do that. Deferred maintenance, 120-year-old town with 120 years of deferred maintenance for the most part. It's hard on the public works staff. They're having major emergencies, which is water, sewer blowouts, at least once a week, if not more. And it's just because it's an old system. I don't have an answer for that, other than you need to know that it makes it very difficult for the staff to plan anything, to project what they do, because when it happens, it's an all hands on deck kind of thing, depending on where it is. It can be a lot of people because they have to do traffic control and all sorts of things with it. It interrupts workflow, and I recommend cross-training for all the people up there and incentives to get the cross-training. So where you got 3 people in parks, 3 people in street department, 3 people here, you then have a trained group of people that can work in all these areas. Staffing, temporary workers, this year they were, we got them through an agency. That doesn't work very well. They can't drive, which means our limited city staff has to drive them to whatever job site, which is highly inefficient, so we need to do an early, selection process to get temporary workers that are city employees that can then drive city vehicles. Some of these things are already done. You got a new city engineer coming. I've looked at his resume. He's a pretty phenomenal guy. You're real lucky. He's got all the background in all the areas that you have most need in water, sewer, streets. I think he will fill the bill very well. I think you need a treatment staff. Your water treatment plant needs more staff. You've got one guy up there working by himself. He's already had one case where he got a snoot full of chlorine because of a leak and lost 30% of his lung capacity because of it, way a number of years ago. But he's up there by himself. There are steps all over everywhere. There's open water. There's all of that, and there's no way, if something happens, he's gonna be there until his wife calls him, or somebody else does. And I don't think that's a terribly good situation. I didn't get the time, but I was looking for some kind of tracking system that you could put in that building to know where he is, so that if he stops and it's in a funny place, it's sort of like I've fallen, you know. He was not very happy with that idea when I suggested it. It still, I think, is an important thing. You know, he's getting up there in age. He's gonna retire in 3 years, and I know my balance is heading south, so the whole issue of safety up there is a big one in my mind. Grants, that's another biggie on the staff thing. I think you don't need to do it right now because you have, a good grants administrator through DOLA funds, in Crystal. But she's over in a year, and I think you need to really seriously consider having a grants team. You get a lot of grants that go through, that are out there all the time. We sort of willy-nilly go after them, where they sometimes don't make sense. For example, it doesn't make any sense to go after a federal tip grant unless it's at least $500,000. The amount of paperwork that goes with one of those grants and the extra cost makes small amount grants worthwhile. We used to figure if you got a $100,000 grant from the feds, you first had $20,000 of that came out of your pocket, and the price of doing the work went up 50% or more. So when you start adding and then all the paperwork, which is forever, if you don't get a lot of money, it's probably not worth it. So a grants administrator that can go in and look at all the sources of grant money and put a comprehensive system together, in my mind, makes a lot of sense. One thing that Karen didn't say, she left it for me, which I appreciate, is we submitted a Ruxton grant for 2022, 2023, and it's not approved, but it's been recommended for approval. Federal money of $3.5 million with local match over 4. So you have $1 million right now to do the design, and now you have funding. Well, hopefully you will have funding if it all goes according to plan to build something. Whatever you build up there, you have to replace the utilities. The water, the sewer lines, all of that needs to be replaced. We just had, while I was here, right after I got here, we had a sewer backup, and I think you all know, it backed up right in the creek because there was pipes off the side nobody knew about, and they're now all plugged, but it's old. And if you're gonna rebuild a roadway, you need to get all the utilities up to grade, and that's the best way to do it. This is John Merritt off the wall. This isn't in here, but well, I'll probably send her up the wall. I think on Ruxton Avenue, you ought to look at the possibility of putting in either the cog railroad coming into town or a trolley up to the cog with a terminus somewhere, Ann Nichols cut me off at the knees, cause I recommended, the terminus could be where the bottling plant is, put a parking garage in. If you do something, I also thought this will send somebody up the wall. Soda Springs is another possibility of turning it into a transportation park. Make a third of it a parking garage, bring in I knew you'd love that.
Mr. Mayor, if you wanna just, maybe we wanna stick to your
Yeah,
recommendations.
well, I had to bring that one in.
There you go.
Just because, you know, one of the advantages, if you can come up with something in that area, is you can restrict who's going up there. Because you have an alternative. Right now, you have no alternative. And so,
Maybe we should call the trolley the Dinky.
yeah,
That is the name of the trolley, by the way.
yeah.
That Houston one. It's called the Dinky.
Anyway,
What else?
the other major initiative, well, two others, I think you need to think about, the possibility of negotiating with CDOT to take over your road, take over Manitou Avenue. I think they ought to bring it up to standard, which means a mill and overlay where it needs it. But you're doing a lot of the maintenance out there already. Maybe not all of it, but you're doing a lot of it. And if you look at the MAPS project, that's a CDOT project, it should be. But it's federal funds and local maps. CDOT's not got a dime in that thing. And it's a state highway. You lose a lot of control by not having, it costs you if you take it over in maintenance dollars in the long run. But I think you can get enough money out of that to create a fund for capital improvements. I know they paid about $3 million to the county for the WAPS project for getting rid of the designation on that road. But it's my suggestion you look at that in the coming year to decide whether or not that's a viable alternative. The last thing is, in addition to $3.5 million, we got the PPRTA to agree to allow us to use $350,000 of our money, our annual amount, which we have over $500,000 in that fund, to rebuild the yards. We have $150 in it, right, it's city funds, and I am recommending to you, you take that $150,000 and use it to remodel City Hall. You guys badly need to do something about City Hall. People are sitting on top of each other. You don't have enough places. You guys don't have an office. You got a rolling screen out there. So I would recommend that 150 not be added on to the 350 we got, but used to fix up down here. So that's pretty much all I have.
Alright. Questions for Mr. Miller? Either on his formal recommendations or his actually, let's leave out the informal ones for the moment. Any questions from council?
Yeah, I do. I guess going back to the CDL, I know we talked about this probably 2 years ago, and, you know, we told us there was a program in place. Everything was up and running, we got drug testing.
And that is going on now.
But it seems to me that it wasn't in place.
Well, it was sort of in place. Most of them have CDLs, but it wasn't followed through as a formal program. And some people slipped through the cracks of it, and now, with your new HR director, that has become a formal program to be tracked and to make sure they do. You're just too small to not have everybody have CDL capability up there.
That's what I was thinking too, was that. And then you have another thing here as far as small equipment, replacing equipment. And what I've seen since I've been on council is that it seems to me that we needed somebody in there that knew what the equipment needs were. And I think we were discussing that a little bit, and not buying stuff that we don't need.
Or
And it
is
seems to me that-
inappropriate.
Yeah, and it seems to me that we've done a lot of that, and we've duplicated a lot of things that maybe we didn't need to duplicate, because again, we're a small city, so, you know, I'm hoping that maybe I know it's, you know, up
Well,
to
you have the people up there that I would trust to make those kind of decisions. But examples is you have two vac trucks. One's new, or relatively new, which is, I think, the water one. The stormwater one is older than dirt, and they presently have a coffee can patch in it on the hose to keep it running. I think it's a possibility. You know, those machines cost like $400,000. I think a good interim for that thing would be to put in $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 and rebuild it. Put a new engine, a new transmission, replace all the hoses and pipes and do that, because you just don't have $400,000 to plop into one machine.
Correct.
So it's a tough situation you have here.
That's kind of like, I think we got a 4,000 gallon water truck that, I don't know if it even gets used.
Yeah, didn't see that one, but I was only here 2.5 months.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any other questions or comments from Mr. Mayor? Thank you very much. What's that?
Thank you.
Oh, thank you again for your time and for your expertise and for the assessment. Very,
It
very
was
much
a privilege, thank you.
Thank you. All right, next is, we have one hearing. So we'll call item H1, public hearing and second reading. Ordinance number 2319, revising chapter 18.89 of the zoning regulations regarding amendment of vacation rental approvals. Is Anthony still here? She is not.
Mayor, I need to recuse myself from this, hearing.
Thank you, Councilman Moore. Appreciate that.
Brian?
I don't know if she's planning on, I'm not sure.
Michelle's still here.
May not be critical, Ms. Howell. Let's see if there are any questions from council concerning this item. We've already had a number of discussions on it. Let's go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there anybody that would like to speak concerning this item? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. Any questions or comments concerning ordinance number 2319? If not, we'd entertain a motion.
I move that on second reading of ordinance, we approve, ordinance 2319, revising chapter 18.89 of the zoning regulations regarding amendment of vacation rental approvals.
Is there a second? Second that. Motion is second. Any further discussion? If not, please vote. Motion passes unanimously with Councilman Moore excused, having recused himself. And if someone could go get him, that would be great. We did turn the thermostat down. I don't know if it was set at 92 or not, but.
It was 74, but I didn't want to turn it back, so I was turning it.
Okay. Actually, maybe you can remember to turn it back on.
It'll get a little cold.
It will. City Administrator report. Mr. Cheney?
So the Stryver Bridge should be in next week. So we're hoping for. We also negotiated some lights for the park, the replacement lights, because those lights were all broken. So we'll have those in as well. This was a while ago. The Stryver basketball courts were cleaned up and put some railroad ties in to prevent some of that mud from coming down on it when it rains. The Mansion Park lights are always going out. I don't know if anyone has noticed that, but we looked at getting those repaired. And it's actually a CSU responsibility, so we have them contacted to come out and fix those lights. And then we've been looking at some software upgrades. Some things we're looking at is a resident alert system, and it's all through Civic HR or Civic software system. And basically, whether it's landlines and phone or cell phones, or we can send out information from our app, and it'll go to them in any kind of way they want, so that they can get the information from us in a timely manner. It will also automatically go to Facebook and other areas that we need to go to, so it's done easily and we can update it quickly for residents. It also can be used for programs or any kind of special events that we can announce as well. We're also looking at some new agenda software, that, again, part of Civic will have the streaming program involved, and we can put the agenda paperwork on the stream so that people can see that and know what's going on, and also then improve to their microphone technology, so maybe we can hear everything that's being said at a meeting. And then a click fix program will also be included. And basically the residents or anyone, if you see a problem in town, you can take a picture of it. It'll go right to Public Works or wherever it needs to go to. They'll assign someone to take care of it, and then that person who sent it in will know that it's taken care of. And that's where we can keep track of things around town. So those are the things we're working on, and hopefully get those going in early 2020.
Give a sense of when that might be in place, the C click.
I'm hoping that's actually the easiest one, and we're hoping about 2 months from now, so maybe by February. 3 months, I guess.
Is that gonna replace that 311?
Yes.
Okay.
It'll replace that. The 311 is a pretty old system. I always look at it as kind of a DOS system, and it actually is abandoned by some staff. They just can't use it. This is real simple, and I believe it'll be really just more effective and get things done.
And do you have any money budgeted for public information plans, so let everybody know that they can click?
Well, the plan is that we will run small classes for the public on how to use these things. I already talked to Public Works, and we'll run them. We'll be able to get training from them. Again, it's easy, and we'll run these small classes for the public to show them how to use the click fix, how to sign up for the alert system. And what's neat about that one, because I heard a lot of people say, well, they use landline still in town. You can put down your landline in there, it'll call your house, and you can pick whatever language you want. So if I say the pool's closed, and they pick German, it will say it in German to them. So.
And Jenny, could you check, we have it now on our website, the ability to sign up for notifications as well. And I've signed up for that, I've never received any. Could you check to see if that module is working?
I will, and it's the same company, so that's gonna be good. It'll merge in there, but I will look into
But
that.
we have something in there that
Yes,
I'm not sure.
you're not getting anything. Okay, I'll look into that.
I'm not sure.
I'll do that.
Thank you. Anything else?
Nothing from me.
All right, Ms. Howell.
Sorry, I had a couple of other things. Just when, December 20th will be the, staff holiday party, so we've sent you invites to all of that. We'd love for you to join us. We will be closing on December 24th at noon, so that the employees can go and be home with their families on that date. Do you want to give a quick update about the ADC report and what's happened there?
Oh, yeah, I mean, the Emmer can add more, I don't wanna put it to her, but at the ADC, the Offices of Alternate Defense Counsel, we were dealing with an issue with, municipal court, making sure that we had a process for getting, the attorneys represent indigent defendants, basically vetted and approved pursuant to the new legislation. They've agreed to basically, provide, all the services that we need, supervising those attorneys, so we don't have to go through our own process. They'll handle it, and I think we've been communicating with Amber about getting the process, everything in place.
Yeah, it should be in place in time for January 2020. So we won't have anything to worry about, and we've already got our application in, I believe, for 2021. So we're good for the next 2 years.
Thank you for taking care of that.
Yeah, Amber did it all.
Thank you.
I just created the crisis.
And then the paper information, I attended the meeting last night, fascinating information, so we'll be talking about that on Tuesday. The department heads, we will be off site on Friday for about 4 to 4.5 hours, just meeting strategically and thinking about how we're gonna move forward, so we'll be doing that. I met with, our HR department today, discussed leadership for next year and training, and what that is gonna look like and how we're gonna move forward and do quarterly off-site half-day retreats. So we're trying to put that in place. Met with the new mayor-elect, city clerk, and mayor pro tem about council orientations and how we're gonna move forward with that and start discussing that. I do wanna recognize, Becca, you made a comment about the budget We did that in literally record time, very quick, about 3 weeks, and Becca put in a tremendous amount of hours, and I do wanna recognize her for that. She was in here Saturdays, Sundays, Friday nights to get the numbers in and make it work with all of us trying to give her numbers and training new staff as we went through it. So, Becca and her staff deserve some extra credit for that, and I wanna recognize them for that. And that's it.
Anything else? All right. Councilman Smith.
I just wanted to add to the budget after being on here for 8 years, and the first year that I had to work with the city budget, it was, we were talking 2-3 meetings a week, you know, and then we come back and then we sit out here and we watch. It was like who was the better salesman between department heads, and they negotiated, and somebody, you always want to be the last department head because then they can outsell everybody else because they already saw the presentation. So this year, I mean, we've improved, but this year was wonderful.
Anything to add on council correspondence?
No, not this week.
All right.
Good.
Councilman Todd?
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Denise mentioned the vaping. I also went to that presentation last night, and just to give you a hint of what's to come, the industry spends $26 million per day marketing vaping products. And nicotine is at least, if not more, addictive than, heroin and something else, I can't remember now. So, you know, the people who are trying to look at, so we're headed for a public health crisis in all likelihood. So I'm very much looking forward to a discussion next week on vaping, because it was an excellent presentation last night. And lastly, I sent 4 of the 4 outgoing council members an email last week about submitting your accomplishments to Judy. And I know that folks don't necessarily like to, toot their own horn, but please respond to Judy, because otherwise I will, and you might not like what I submit for you. So, because I could make things up, and they might not be things you're proud of. So, anyway, please get those back to Judy as soon as possible. Thank you, that's all.
I'm sorry, that's something you sent us on email, because I'm not sure that I got that.
Okay, yes, I asked the outgoing council members to submit their, at least 5 of their accomplishments over their tenure on council to Judy for the, end of term, resolutions.
Did you send that to me too?
I did.
It's just showing up, Karen.
Thank you, Gary.
You got it? All right, I'll look for it now.
I'll resend it to
Okay.
you all.
You know what, Nancy, send it to my, regular email, because this thing doesn't work at my house.
All right. Councilman Roy.
I don't have, well, I do have something. You gonna talk about web? You gonna talk about the web?
Me? No, go ahead.
Okay, so, the ribbon cutting at the WAP was, a neat little experience, and, but beyond that, hopefully everybody has really seen the transformation that's happening in that neck of the woods. It's not just the built-up environment that looks so sweet, it's the, as we were having the ribbon cutting, a family with a stroller was like going over the bridge with, they were just, I don't know where they were going, but you never saw that kind of thing before because it was almost impossible. And that kind of transformation of the use of that area is really why the greater community spent a gazillion dollars on it, but it's really been neat to watch. And the little bit that's left will really not be noticed, so much. In fact, there were even a family on bikes on the trail about to go over the new bridge, the Midland Bridge. And we're gonna have to go up the ramp because it doesn't go anywhere right now. But it's really neat to see that transformation after 3 years.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Did they say anything about the environmental restoration that they're gonna do? I mean, that's an ancient historical area of indigenous trade with the white man, yada, yada, yada. It's not just a cement bridge and a trail. So what are they gonna do to repair that damage? They've already told the neighborhood that they're not replanting most of the trees.
Yeah,
And there's a gazillion gallons of frickin' cement there, so what are they planning?
I can't speak to why they chose not to do those trees. I suspect they probably weren't in the right of way, so there's no right of way to plant trees is what I suspect. but for the rest of it, we're gonna have the park, the little pocket park isn't finished yet. And I don't know if they have any plans to plant anything along the rest of the creek park. I don't know what their landscape plan is, to any great extent for the greater project, I don't.
I did talk to the landscape architect for the project and brought that very issue up. I brought up a couple of contexts. And he said that there is a landscape plan, but because it's winter, they can't execute yet. And I asked if he could please publicize that landscape plan. So more to follow. I'm sure it will not be adequate, but at least it is something. So, we'll find out.
And let's not debate that, I don't think we have the information about that plan, but it's certainly something that someone can gather. But it doesn't do us any good to debate it here, if there's specific questions.
I'm just asking, does anybody know?
Does anybody have any additional?
Apparently not.
So I would say we don't, but if you want Denise or Roy to find out, why don't you ask them to get some information for us?
And it sounds like that was gotten by.
I did ask for that.
By Nancy.
But also, 1,000 feet of creek got moved to the north. What are they doing to rehab that habitat?
Yeah.
I know it's important to you.
They put that in like a great accomplishment, that's a horrible thing.
So if there's additional information that's needed, perhaps staff can get that for us, I think is what I'm suggesting.
Would you guys do that? I mean, I don't care if anybody else is interested, I'm interested in what they're doing.
Wouldn't Lisa
Or not
Baldwin
doing.
have that information?
Somebody will have that information. I don't know.
I would think that she would be a great starting point.
Okay, anything else? Councilwoman Woodward.
Yes, can I just comment on your council orientation thing? Nancy and Ken and myself did something in Denver that was very helpful. And I just wanted to remind, if you didn't know about that, to get the details maybe about that, because it was like a 2-day thing and it was really helpful for me.
Thank you.
Also, I have just these parking numbers that you guys can grab for me if you want to. Parking revenues are up 59% over last year. We're currently at $1,383,779. If you're wondering where those increases are coming from, we're making much more money on the bar trail this year than we were last year. And also there were some changes on Ruxton that had also contributed to a boost. Otherwise, like the lots and many of those things are similar to last year. But if that's what's driving us, has driven us to the 59%. These I'd be happy to pass around if you need to see them. I also got some council correspondence from Mike Graham. I sent Roy a copy of that. It sounds like there's 2 issues. One is there's not enough enforcement. And the second one is there seems to be an RPP person parking in his, in that lower Ruxton part, and I don't know how that works, but maybe we could work together to get back to him. And maybe with Kevin too, because I just couldn't answer.
Was it sent to Kevin as well?
I don't know if it was. I will double check, and if not, I will copy Kevin on it, and he sent me another one this afternoon. And I think that's all I have.
I attended the open space meeting and I actually don't have my notes here, but I do remember this, and except I can't remember his name. I know Nancy will know his name. He works at Medicine Wheel.
Corey Satella.
Yes. He applied to be on the open space. He's just a font of information, and there he lives in Manitou, but he's a green card.
Right, he's not a citizen. We went through this when he applied like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, but I mean, we could change that.
Our charter does not allow it. We did.
But I'm saying, I think maybe we should change that, because we're in a world of transformation and people are moving everywhere. We've got all, the whole globe is moving. And I think someone like him, he's spectacular.
Pardon? Andrea's on it currently, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, his wife is.
All right,
I don't know Andrew.
perhaps we can move this
But I
conversation
just think
forward.
that's something that we should look into, because, I think he deserves a place on the OSAC. And there was something else that I cannot call for.
Okay, I had one piece of correspondence, and that is literally a piece of correspondence that came today. And this is a letter addressed to Dear Mayor and council members. I'm not gonna read the whole letter, but I think it's worthy of at least someone taking a look at it. In light of our conversation of the Manitou RPP, this gentleman was visiting from North Dakota, and he parked in what he thought was, and sent a picture of, what he thought was a 2-hour parking only between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. every day. He puts money in the meter, he comes back in 90 minutes, and he gets a $70 parking ticket. And it turns out, and he says, takes another picture, actually this is a picture taken by the enforcement people, that shows his car in front of a sign that says residential parking, without perhaps the sign telling where the zone is. And so he sent, along with his letter, saying, I have no intentions of protesting this, coming back 800 miles to protest the ticket, and therefore I have enclosed a check for $20, which he deems to be reasonable settlement of the unwarranted parking citation. Frankly, the decent thing to do would be to tear up the check and re-examine your parking enforcement policies. In the past, when I have received these, I've never received a check before, but in the past, when I receive these letters, I typically write a personal letter back to the person and explain to them the reason why and so forth. In this case, I'm at a bit of a loss. And I'm at a loss because I'm not positive that our signs do an adequate job, perhaps, and at least I'd ask someone to take a look at that, and take a look at the $20 check that he sent, and figure out what we might do to respond to this gentleman as appropriate. That's the only correspondence I have. All right, at this point, we are going to go into an executive session.
Mayor, may I
Yes.
just recap to make sure I have everything?
Yes,
that you
please,
want me
thank
to
you.
do? So you want us to look at the sign up for notifications and see what is happening and what, if that is not working, what's happening there? To check on the rehab of the habitat and the vegetation on the project. CML orientation, and look at that, make sure that we have those dates up in Denver. RPP parking and what's happened there, with Mr. Graham. The charter to see what that states, and so I will do that, and then this letter that you have. Anything else? And looking at the signs.
Yeah, I would just like to bring up again, if council is interested to discuss putting a moratorium on future RPPs for a period of time.
Do you want that on the next work?
I'd like to suggest that the next council frankly deal with that. I wasn't in on the conversation, you all can do what you like. But at this point of the year, my suggestion is to let the council, and maybe next council take that up. If this council would like to deal with it, that'd be great. And I was gonna let you know what we have coming up, and there's been a suggestion for the next couple of meetings to keep them short. We have about an hour and a half meeting, maybe a little bit longer than that, on the 26th. The 3rd has a pretty full meeting on the 3rd, and then and then we have a work session on the 10th, not a lot on the 10th, the only thing right now is the limiting the time for council meetings. So just to give you a sense, and then the 17th, looks relatively full, but not more than a couple to two-ish or so hours. So that's what's coming up.
Whereas I normally would agree with you, I think, well, not normally, but I might agree with you on this. In this case, I think that this council is much more familiar with the RPP issues, and hence I would like to pursue my desire to have it. So I guess it's just up to what council would like to do.
What's your pleasure?
I'm all for moratorium.
Well, I doubt we'd get the moratorium put in place. Are you just arguing about a work session to
Just
discuss
starting
it?
off would be fine with me.
I think at this point, a work session, and then we can decide what to do from there, yeah.
So you'd like it this year?
Yep.
Okay. You would like it this year? Anybody else wanna weigh in?
Would we be able to get to it this year?
Well, that's what I just,
No, I mean, we could get to the work session this year. Pretty confident we can do that. Can we take any action on it this year? Cause if we can't, then I'd say punt it. If we can, I'm okay.
I think it's just a matter of we decide if we wanna do it or not. There is always, not always, but there is room on the agenda to do it.
the last two meetings we have canceled because of the Tuesday meetings for the holidays. We could schedule the meeting on Monday, on one of those Mondays, and so that's another
that's something to consider, because the one on December 17th, you have two ordinances on that will only be the first reading, and we need a second reading, or it moves to the next council. So there are two right now for new business on the 17th.
Actually, I don't know as if that would, if we pass something on the 17th, we couldn't necessarily pass it on the 24th, could we? The 10 days.
Well, is it 10 days in between?
Yeah.
I can just double check that.
So anything, and we do have, by the way, we also have the issue potentially on the sales tax. Ms.
Yes.
Johnson asked what we were gonna do with that towards the end of November when the sales tax is, certified. And so the question is, how would we deal with that ordinance, which would increase the, tax? So that's another issue that we do need to consider. Let's try to focus on this issue and see what the consensus is on trying to get this done.
We have 2 work sessions and 2 regular sessions between now and, the 17th.
It is 7 days between first and
7
second.
days, okay.
So we could,
Yes.
So, what's your pleasure? I've heard a little bit of both, and I heard requests for some more information. Did that help you?
Yeah, sorry. Does it take an ordinance? Mr. Parker from Moratorium?
Yes.
For moratorium on the RPPs, that we take an ordinance?
Yes, it's a legislative act, it's typically a better way to do impose moratoriums. Like a special ordinance, it wouldn't have to be codified.
All right, so, I've heard several yeses. Yes?
Mine would be, I'm looking at 2 of the new council people in the audience, they've got a lot of energy, so I would like to point it to them.
All right, postpone it until next year. Councilman Todd?
Question I have on this is, for us to have a work session, I'm not sure if council doing a job on a work session on the topic is a good thing. I think this is something that I would appreciate, staff leading, and maybe this cannot be, addressed by staff in a time frame. I do like the idea of this current council, it's been through the pluses and the minuses a lot. So I don't jump on retrain Gary in terms of the energy of the new council.
Hey, we don't agree on something.
Yeah, it's just the one. Yeah. 4 years before the council meeting. So yeah, just the big question is, if we're having a work session, who's gonna do what in the work session? So, if nobody's gonna do anything, I don't think we should have a work session.
So are you suggesting that it would just be an ordinance that would be drawn up, you don't need a work session, or are you saying that, do you understand my question? So are you saying we don't need a work session, we could just do a moratorium ordinance, or are you saying that we're not ready to do it because we don't even know who would do the work session?
Well, I'm just raising the question, it could be an up and down vote, we do have the ordinance prepared and an up and down vote, I'm just saying, what perspective are we gonna take, the pros and cons of that?
I would say that we do have a transportation and parking advisory board, and we maybe should ask them to consider what this would look like, and allow them to have a couple of meetings, public meetings about it, because that's where people typically think that this policy is going to originate out of, and have that extra discussion, and allow some public notice about it, so that, people who are both in an RPP and not in an RPP can kind of talk about it. And then maybe the Transportation and Parking Board could make a recommendation, and the thing is, staff is involved in that, because there's always a staff liaison there. And I just feel like that's using our advisory board the way they're designed. So that would be what I've come up with, is I prefer us to punt it to them and say, get this on your agenda, and that by default brings it to the next council. But I think that's where if we're just bypassing them, I have a problem with that. Even though they're advisory, we haven't allowed them to advise us on a moratorium.
Susan gets an excellent catch. They really are institutional knowledge on this topic, long-term members.
And it allows for more public engagement, because you've got the ability to discuss it at that level and at the council level, if it rises to the council level.
So with that new information, let me re-poll here and see, I think Gary, you probably haven't changed, you'd still like to put it on after January.
Give it to them.
Everybody.
Give it to the TBD.
Okay,
I can live with that.
okay, okay.
Yes.
All right, so the direction is to then refer that item of a potential moratorium to the Parking and Transportation Board. I would ask them to please consider, and maybe this is assumed and I missed this, that this would not impact the Waltham? Is that the
It's already
assumption?
in progress.
Okay, so since that had been approved or applied for, then that's not subject to that. Okay.
I would think that the TPB, if we're gonna punt it to them, let them make that decision. Or
Well,
recommendation.
well,
Let
they
them
are
make
No,
a
I think that
recommendation.
recommendation's already been made by the fact that it's been, the application is in. So by definition, they have met that. You could perhaps,
I asked that this evening, and it was Michelle indicated to me that it was already in process.
So typically moratoriums apply to applications made after the date of the moratorium, generally.
so that wouldn't be an issue that they would weigh in on.
Now, Waltham could still decide not to do an RPP.
Well,
You can always decide not to approve one.
And that's true.
that would be the way to deal with that particular issue. Okay, so it sounds like this matter is gonna be referred to the Transportation Parking Board. Anything else? If not, I would entertain a motion concerning our executive session. Just to let the public know, we are moving into executive session for purposes of legal advice. Is there a motion? No, is there a motion?
Sure, I move that we go into executive session pursuant to section 5.1.c of the Manitou Springs Charter for the purpose of legal advice.
Second.
There's a motion and a second, any further discussion? Not for the vote, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Quick question before we do that, I cannot find the change that was recommended on the short-term rental resolution. And I'm struggling to find out where we were making that change. In the ordinance? In the resolution. Did you capture that? Because the section I was